Welcome to Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Friedemann. As always on Empowerment Radio, I love to tackle the challenges in our lives, those obstacles that seem to be in the way to greater fulfillment, success, and joy. And what bigger obstacles are there than fear? Well, today I want to talk about two specific fears. One is the fear of fear itself, and the other one is the fear of aging, that fear of losing your beauty, your youth, your vitality, your health, your relevance. Both fears can make you feel trapped, overpowered, and may even lead to depression. But what if you could actually have joy from fear? And what if you could age joyfully? Well, these are exactly the book titles of my very special guest today, Dr. Carla Manly, who published this year these so relevant books on fear and on aging. So today we're going to talk about how you can transform your fears into greater joy. Dr. Carla, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask you about you because, you have these double whammies of books coming out, or they came just out, and they were about fear and also fear in relationship to aging. And both then also have the word joy in it, which I think is just a beautiful juxtaposition. But tell us a little bit about you. Have you been struggling with fear? Had you a journey that led you from fear to joy?
Absolutely. I'm the ninth child in a family of 10, raised back east, and very well-intentioned parents, a very religious environment. And in my era, children, especially if you were a girl, you were to be seen and not heard. And so I did my very best to be an accommodating young lady and do as I was told. And I tested rather high on IQ tests. So when I expressed a desire to be a psychologist or a teacher, and I really wanted to be a psychologist, I was told, no. You're one of the really smart ones. You should be an attorney. And so it was laid out for me that I, should be an attorney. And so I went through my path, went to college, and when I left college and went to a top-notch law school. And my body knew much more than I did that this was not what I was going to do. And it rebelled, and I was actually almost died from anorexia nervosa. And left law school and began to listen to my body a little bit more, enrolled in a master's program to have my degree in counseling. So I could be a therapist, and in my travels, I ultimately chose the route of being a school counselor because I have a love of children and teaching and helping children. And so along the way, I married and then had 2 children and realized, if I really want to do right by these children and also do right, now I was getting this message from my family, we need you, to be doing other things. And so to be able to do what I needed to do, I was in a field of investment that I'm not a money motivated person. And so even though I'm good at business, I was not at all in an area that gave me any joy. It just doesn't give me joy. And so I provided for my husband and my children for a very long time, and I'm very good at that. And then one day woke up and said, I am miserable. I am just miserable. And I've been putting on a really great show for everybody else, but I am miserable. And I also realized one of the biggest things that came to me was, here I was telling my children, when you grow up, because now they're these beautiful young boys, and I'm trying to be an excellent role model. And I realized that I was telling them, when you grow up, follow your dreams, follow your passions, do it, don't follow money, follow what is right for you. Because I knew many people who had lots of money and were very unhappy, some of the most unhappy people I've ever met. And so I realized, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. I'm being the provider, but here I'm, teaching them something, but I'm not living it. So I spoke with my then husband and said, honey, I have done so much for you and for everyone else. It's now time for me to live my dream. And he knew what my dream was. He says, no, you have enough education. And that was the beginning of the end of the marriage. And so even though it was very difficult and
Oh my.
challenging, I left the marriage and realized in the midst of that how wise it was to have done that for my children, for me. And so I went back. I was working full time, went to doctoral school and did that evening, nights, weekend, did my internship with a juvenile probation in the East, started that in the evening because I was still, income producing. And ultimately, slowly and steadily created the life I have now, which is doing what I've always wanted to do. And it's not easy work. It's, it's hard work. It's challenging work, but I love it. It is my passion. And so that is where Joy from Fear, my first book, came from. My dissertation, I wanted to, in doctoral school, I wanted to understand what it was that had held me back. And and when I realized it was fear, I thought, no, I'm so strong and tough, it can't be fear. So I decided to investigate fear. And I created a qualitative and quantitative questionnaire, essentially did thousands of surveys through those two, and realized I wasn't alone and that I had a message to offer other people because I wanted to use my journey to help people not do what I did, or if they were doing what I did, to be able to find a way out of it sooner. And as luck would have it, during my dissertation, one of my mentors was Thomas More. And he put me through my paces. He really did. And I learned and developed and evolved so much. So Joy from Fear has gone through several iterations until it left a sort of academic feel to be a very heart work feel, which is what it is, and it's a guide. So that's where Joy from Fear came from.
Now, wonderful story. It reminds me also a little bit of mine, where I was told I had to become a physician because that's a tradition of the family. And then I also was miserable. And I wasn't married at that time when I decided to leave that path of cardiology, which I was in, and then started to do what I'm doing now, which is also helping people to overcome their fears and their struggles. But I can imagine that you, with your determination to follow that what felt right, also were facing a lot of fear and leaving your marriage and starting again, going back to school. Or was the moment when you made the decision the fear gone?
No, and that's why I really understand my clients, because the fear doesn't leave. It might lessen, you might learn to not be afraid of it, but especially when you have, two young boys depending upon you and a house payment and all of that, fear is a very real thing. But what I learned was energetically to notice the fear and not feed it. And that's where I came up with the terms destructive fear and constructive fear. Destructive fear is that voice that says, uh-oh, things aren't going to work out. Things aren't, no, this is too big of a risk. You better do what everyone says you should do. Then the voice of constructive fear says, it's not to me about manifesting, right? Some people think manifesting means I'll dream about it and it will happen. To me, it's about dream about it, visualize it, and then do the work. Do the work to make your dream come true. Do the work. And so to me, that is the voice of constructive fear, that very wise, powerful, sincere, gentle, and often very quiet voice. And that's where it gets pretty tough, because I believe that destructive fear, its voice is very loud, often very angry and pushy. And the voice of constructive fear is at first often almost imperceptible. So that's, and then where the transformational fear part comes in is that when we do the work, if we have faith and perseverance and determination, then our life transforms. And then we realize that all along fear has been our friend, that fear is our friend.
I completely agree with this notion that the fear is friend. It's interesting that you see the constructive fear as that wise voice inside of you, because I'm wondering, that doesn't sound very fear-provoking in itself. It sounds more like a little bit a part of you that nudges you forward to do the right thing, to get your... So why do you associate that with fear? Did that voice make you feel afraid?
The way I like to look at it is that we've made fear the bad guy.
Right.
I like to see as fear as Janus-faced, two-faced, right?
Mm-hmm.
That on this side is the bully that crowds the sidewalk and says, run, stay stuck, cower, hide, be mean, be aggressive. That's all fear. If we slow it down, there is another side of fear that is actually helpful. That is why fear has a friendly side. That's why I call it constructive side. Just like anything, the light, the shadow, the yin, the yang, I believe fear is the same. That we have this side that we're used to. I'm not talking about rational fear. Fear of a snarling dog,
right,
or fear
right.
of a rapist. I'm talking about irrational fear. So I like to look at it as the two-sided figure. That if we slow it down, and what's interesting is it works. When I am working with a group or with an individual, right, and I teach this method, then people realize, oh, all I have to do is slow it down and look at the other side, listen, and then when we listen, then we start hearing the opposite side of fear. It is a novel way of seeing fear. It is.
Right. Right.
And then realizing that when we can contain it and turn it around, that then we can do something with it. We don't have to overcome it. We don't have to run from it. We do have to learn to see it.
I love that. That's wonderful. And I think destructive sounds as if the fear would want to harm you, but maybe it's more our reaction to the fear that actually are creating the harm. When I see fear as something that ultimately just, for example, the fear that told me, don't leave medicine. You're going to make a big mistake. Everyone gonna, either think you're crazy, your parents going to be disappointed with you. And that was a protection. That was simply saying, don't break the mold. Don't, disappoint or measure up to expectations. But it's becoming destructive when you're responding to it and you're saying, okay, you're right. But the intention is simply to be okay, to be safe, because that fear part still thinks, you're better off doing exactly what you're told to do, like a good child that I always was, a good boy that always did what he wanted to do, what he was told to do, and all of a sudden doing what you actually want to do and not what others want you to do. That was scary. So I understand that fear also as a part that has more the emphasis on protection and not so much the emphasis on fulfillment or on thriving and these kind of things.
Absolutely. And I love your story because either way you ended up doing heart work.
Right.
And in fact, you're doing work of the heart now that may prevent cardiovascular disease.
That was the idea in the first place. Yes. Absolutely.
I'm really with you on that. You're doing the preventative work of making sure, because I actually see that in that I believe that people with hardened hearts, cold hearts, where they've learned to be hard and aggressive and brittle, their hearts sometimes are filled with disease. Because
absolutely. That mind-body connection is very powerful. Well, when we come back, we talk about also the mind-body connection when it comes to another big fear topic that so many people are struggling with, which is the fear of aging. So that was your second book that just came out. So we'll talk more about this after the break.